Are you considering making a move to Denver? Hold that thought. Here's 5 things that might make you reconsider or might not. Denver's a pretty nice place to live, but I often get approached by people that have moved here or people that are like, hey, I have a question, Mr. Native, about these things, and I just wanted to bring them to the table. And at the end of the day, you'll probably be like, yep, that's to be anticipated. That's to be expected in a great place to live like Denver. So let's get rolling so you don't make a mistake of moving here without knowing these things. What's up, guys? My name's Jeremy Kane. I am a Colorado native, actually a Denver native. I buy and sell real estate, help people build wealth through real estate, and I would be happy to help you if you are considering a move to Denver or you already are in Denver and considering making a move in the near future. Let's have a conversation so you're best prepared to make that happen. While you're here, if you like what the content's telling you, like, comment, subscribe. Let's touch base and stay in touch through the socials. All right, so we all know that Denver's an amazing place to live. We all know that 300 days of sunshine in the mountains and the escape to the ski slopes and all the things and hiking that you can do in the summers, not to mention the luxury of the city life of Denver, growing from, a stinky cow town back in the day to a place with, great restaurants and amenities and access, as well as, a pretty decent city life. So we all know all of that. So what are these things that I'm talking about? What are the reasons that are raised, when people say, hey, what's this all about? Or, they're a little confused after moving here, what's really going on? First things first, we're going to talk about the high cost of living. Denver continues to be, 11% higher on average than the national average. The real estate and the cost of real estate is absolutely, 36% higher on average, according to the Google machine. But we'll talk about the competitive real estate market in a second. But the cost of living everywhere has really gone up over, the post-COVID timeframe. Obviously, we had the supply chain issues and all of that stuff that was associated with the pandemic. But the cost of living in Denver has increased and increased substantially. I mean, there's homes that have increased, 40, 50% in value over just 2 or 3 year periods. That's on the high end, but certainly, something to consider. The national average of home appreciation is usually around 3% on average over the last 60 years. In Denver, it's 6%. So if you're outweighing that, you're going to have that cost of living and the home prices appreciating. You're going to see some sort of, offset in the cost of living to be in a desirable area. And as people move here because they have the ability to work from home and do telecommute, as so to speak, we should probably change that terminology in my opinion. But, it is a desirable place to live because you can log off and you can go for a nice hike, 10, 15 minutes away from your house, or 5 if you live on the west side where I live. So just something to consider is that cost of living, average rents, average home prices are, among, a pretty high level when you compare it to other places, especially in the Midwest and so on. So make sure that you're doing the research. I'm not saying you wouldn't. Most people look into the cost of living when moving here. We also have an influx of businesses and job growth that maybe isn't in all places. And so that obviously offsets some of that as we go. But when compared to some of my buddies in Pennsylvania and Ohio, my family, the cost of living, things just cost more here. And that's just what it is. And it's part of the tax to live here, I guess. So don't skip over that step before you get here. That's a really important one. Obviously, as it plays into our survival pretty apparently. The next is the weather and the altitude changes. Everyone knows the snow. Everyone, understands that. One thing to understand is, the weather can change on a dime. And so that does give us a little bit of a higher latency for, severe hailstorms and tornadoes and things. Hail seems to be here to stay in the Denver metro, front range area, just by nature of how the storms come in and the mountains and the cold and the hot. And hail causes problems. First of all, it hurts when it hits you on the head. Absolutely. But it also, pretty significant property damage and not really anything you can do, right? We can prevent forest fires, but we can't prevent hailstorms. So that's something that people don't necessarily understand or know. hail does hurt when it hits your head, so I hope you know that. But also, this has an effect on property damage, so that affects property insurance and so on. We're not quite as bad as Florida, where insurance companies just aren't insuring houses anymore. But we may get to that point, to be honest, with roofs and things like that. So insurance companies are really struggling right now with these recent hailstorms just this last year, as far as what they're paying out more than they're taking in. And that's not good for any business. So that's where we really have to understand the weather patterns. And maybe reason, if you love your car and you absolutely love it, make sure you have a garage, because it does do a damage on cars as well. So that's the thing with the weather. Obviously, it does snow here. I would say that this is something that's probably misrepresented. People are like, oh, it's going to be cold all winter, it's going to snow all this. I don't want to learn how to drive in the snow. And it doesn't snow that much here. When it does, it could come in and it could change your day. You could have some cancellations, or you could have another hour added onto your 30-minute commute. But for the most part, the beauty of Colorado, and one of the things I absolutely love about it, is it does snow. So we do have the beauty of that, the weather changing, the different temperatures and climates. But typically, a few days after the snow comes down, no matter if it's 3 feet or 3 inches, the sun's out and snow is melting. Obviously, they take care of the roads and things like that. People have 4-wheel drive and snow tires and all the things. But typically, the cool part is that unlike the northern part of our country, I know, especially in the Midwest, the snow melts and it's gone. It's not like black snow or a black, black pile of whatever it is all winter long. It just mostly melts off and is gone. It's not abnormal to have a 65-degree day in the middle of December or January or February. The snowiest month on average is March. So before you start planting your flowers on St. Patrick's Day, you might want to hold off until Mother's Day over here in the Colorado areas. But definitely part of that, it also has snowed in June. So weather is something, and it can change daily. I tend to think the change is welcomed, and I love the diversity of the weather, and I love that you could leave your house in a parka and have to have shorts and a t-shirt on by the time you get home. But some people don't like that, so that's definitely there. With the weather, also the altitude is something definitely affects people that when they first move here or they come to visit. A lot of people that come to visit will, arrive at 6 or 7 at night, head straight up the mountain, maybe have a few cocktails, dehydrate themselves even more than they should be, and they hit the slopes. They go up to slopes 13,000, 14,000 feet, and that's a pretty major altitude change when you're considering someone that's coming from sea level. So make sure that you're acclimating to that. Altitude sickness is not a great thing. I've never had it. Like I said, I'm a native. So, but it does knock people down pretty good and ruin some vacations. So if you are feeling a little funky and you just moved here, that could be why. Make sure you're hydrating enough and doing that piece. The next thing is the traffic and transportation infrastructure. As Colorado and the Denver metro area becomes a desirable place and more desirable place to live, our roads are just not amazing. And I will be the first to tell you that our traffic is nowhere near what I've heard from the DC area and, some of the locales in California that I've seen and driven through. But it is, a concern, and we do have, a decent infrastructure, but as we continue to grow, there's not a lot of room for expansion, especially in the central parts and the central portions of our city. A few years ago, I always use this as an example, not few, like 15 years ago, there's a big road project called T-Rex that I-25 is the interstate that runs right through, the center of the state and the center of Denver. And they widened that to, 12, 14 lanes down in the tech center, which is a southern suburb business park that was, that downtown kind of expanded into. A lot of tech companies started there, but now all kinds of businesses are there. And they expanded that road to 14 lanes or 12 lanes, I'm not exactly sure. And they also included installing the light rail, and everyone was up in arms. This is crazy. It's going to be such a headache for so long. Well, that's pretty much the only place that flows naturally in the central portion of the city now, because they did that and they put that work in. However, as you move north into the downtown areas, we've built so close to those interstates that, it requires eminent domain in order to make those expansions if they're needed down the road. Eminent domain takes some time. It's a pain. People get their feelings hurt. And so that's something to really keep an eye on. And then, the infrastructure as far as housing and that goes, there is, an increased number of homeless people that seem to be in the city of Denver, especially, but even on the suburbs a little bit. And it's not, it's not completely out of control. It does get out of control. And sometimes I think all cities that attract a lot of people have that. But the infrastructure of housing is something that needs to be worked on. And I don't know. My idea was always to take all these businesses that aren't being used because everyone's working from home and turn them into some sort of affordable housing or something along those lines. I think the biggest problem, in my opinion, the Colorado and Denver affordable housing program doesn't really set anybody up for success. In fact, it's more of a ripoff than renting, in my opinion. And you have a lot more liability because you're the homeowner. So that's just my 2 cents on that, and that could be adjusted. But it's also part of any growth in any city as you go. So that's kind of the next thing that I hear people kind of talk about, like what's the plan here? What's the plan here? Obviously, all states are fighting this, and all cities, major cities, have some sort of, increase in this from what I've heard. So let's move on to the competitive real estate market. With the competitive real estate market, with a place that's desirable to live, supply often doesn't keep up with demand. That's exactly the case here in Denver. We can't build enough homes, even for our natural growth in population and even our natural migration in and out of the state. And so when there's a big influx of people moving here, people want to move here, people grow up, right? Mountain towns, they, maybe can have share a condo with 4 other people. Well, they all want to stay in Denver once they're here and they got a taste of those mountain winters on the slopes. And now they all need houses because they all have, careers and all the things. And so that's something that we still can't outpace the growth here. We are, currently building a ton of mostly apartments for rent. There are some pretty big developments going on for sale. But this is really a result of the condo laws and the class action lawsuits laws and things that we had as far as builder defects in the 90s and early 2000s. And people just stopped building condos. So they stopped building those, entry level, places for, maybe a duplex or maybe a single family home. And so obviously in those areas, you could house a lot more people on that land, by building up and condos, but those just don't exist. So you have the options to rent or you have the options to purchase. We have condos, we have townhomes. There's a huge gap in that because it was so difficult and such a risk for people to buy during that time. So that really has led to a super competitive real estate market with supply and demand. So just make sure that if Denver's your long-term home, that you look at a plan, and I'm more than happy to sit down and talk to you. Reach out, text me 303-210-0378, comment, look me up on socials to chat about making a plan for this. As I want to see everybody who moves here get into home ownership. There are some things you can do leading up to that, right when you get into town or even before, so that can be an option, right? Because we do have the businesses, we do have the job growth, we have all of that as available. So if we can make a plan with somebody who understands the lending process and financial process, we can get you into home ownership as soon as possible and out of renting. Because rents are almost as expensive as mortgages, even with these high interest rates that we're currently seeing at time of this recording. Next is the limited water resources. This isn't just the lack of lakes and reservoirs, but obviously that's pretty much by default as a result. We haven't had a lot of water restrictions as far as watering and usage lately, but we definitely have that when we do have droughts. Colorado is technically a desert, semi-arid desert is the climate. When we do have those droughts, sometimes those water restrictions and resources will come on, but then also there's always talk of the legalities around the water rights for down Colorado River, New Mexico, Arizona, California, of course, Nevada. So that's always something that's out there. the kind of underlying piece of water is sometimes there's forest fires. So make sure that are well aware of those and look at kind of some burn histories and things, and make sure if you are living up in the mountains that you have some sort of, understanding of what that looks like, because forest fires do increase tremendously when we have really dry, winters and things, and the ground isn't as saturated and wet as it normally might be due to a traditional winter snowfall and runoff and all of that. So, and if you're looking for like boating lakes and things, we have a few. We don't have a ton. If you're coming from a place like Minnesota or Wisconsin, it's definitely not the option. You may have to trade in your trolling pole for a fly fishing pole. We do have obviously the mountain creeks and streams. They are colder because they are fed by snow. Pretty much snow becomes those streams, and it doesn't have time to warm up like you might float a river down, in the south or something. People do it here. It's not terrible, but it is considerably colder than the rivers I've been in that are, south of Colorado, so to speak. So make sure that you, if you're a major water person, you kind of look into that, the resources, and as always, be conservative with your usage and aware of other people's opinions as that goes, because there are definitely two sides of that puzzle when it comes to global warming, believe it or not. So the honorable mention one, right? We're going to get into it, is when you move here, natives have a complex. I am a native. I don't advertise it, so to speak, except for on my YouTube channel as a way to tell you that I know about a lot of areas in town. But natives will, post, bumper stickers and have signs in their homes and everything. I will tell you, a Colorado native has never ever met a person who can drive better than them in the snow, and they absolutely will, so to speak, stake claim to territories as if we were some explorers with the ability to just pee on our lot and call it ours or whatever. Just kidding. But there is definitely a native kind of undertone to a lot of things, and if natives kind of hold themselves to a little bit higher court, so to speak. So I'm not that. I'm a friendly guy. I love people moving in and out of here. I love the living here and allowing other people to explore our state and things like that. But just know that that's part of it. So all in all, a lot of these things are very normal across, the country, but I just wanted to give you a Colorado specific spice to some of these things to know before you move here. And if some of them are unbearable, we would definitely want to talk to you about it, and make sure you're prepared for that move if you choose to move here in lieu of some of these adjustments that you might have to make in your personal life. So I hope this helped. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you have any questions or anyone who's looking to buy or sell or move to Colorado, I'd be happy to have a conversation. There's a consultation link below. I love talking to people, even if it's just, a dream, to sit down and make a plan and help it become a reality. So I hope you have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.